Hi.
Good morning.
Not as
morning.
cold as I thought it was going to be,
No,
which
it's
is
good.
great.
Speaker.
Okay. Depressing news this week. It's really hard to even want to open the paper. Anyway, that's just.
Yeah.
But I did open the Vineyard Times and saw an article concerning the history of slavery and how it relates to the island. And I was reminded of something I probably knew years ago, that the federal government prohibited the importation of importation of slaves after 1808, which was kind of maybe old but new information to me, but not that it made any difference with the slave trade. So anyway, this is about history, not present-day stuff. Last week I mentioned that I would read about the murder of souls, and have chosen one individual, a 14-year-old slave girl named Janette, whom we will be kneeling for. Subsequently, I asked myself why I impulsively volunteered to do something I can't very well, which is public speaking, and that's why I'm reading. But I knew it was necessary to show my gratitude and support for the organizers of MVBLM, the speakers, and the progressive actions spawned here and now and for the future. And why reel back the history of Black lives 2 centuries to examine old history and old injustices when the stories of murders are so very real and present today? The answer is that the degradation that resulted from the buying and selling of human beings as chattel profoundly influenced the culture of racism that exists today. Plus, Janette's story comes from a book I had just read, The Making of a Racist, by a professor of Southern history, Charles Dew. The first half of the book is autobiographical, detailing the racist influences of the author's Confederate youth and his later enlightenment at a Northern liberal arts college. The second section deals with the history of the internal slave trade, meaning within the United States. This is after the Prohibition. The following is a mashup of quotations and my inserts. Quote, from 1790 to 1861, over 1 million slaves were transported from the Atlantic coastal states to the upper and lower South. By 1860, the dimensions of the traffic of slaves had reached staggering proportions. The internal slave trade became the largest enterprise in the South outside of the plantation itself. The author concentrates on the slave markets in Virginia, but also quotes others. And I think these are important backdrops to the embedded racism we experience today. Quote, a commissioner dispatched from Alabama to Kentucky in 1860 to persuade the Kentuckians to leave the Union cited multiple reasons for secession, carefully emphasizing that African slavery in the southern states constitutes the most valuable species of their property, worth not less than $4 billion, forming in fact the basis upon which rests the prosperity and wealth of most of these states. A delegate to the Mississippi Secession Convention wrote, our position is thoroughly identified with the institution of slavery, the greatest material interest in the world. An example, September 27th, 1860, 2 Richmond slave traders, Davis and Lee, went into partnership to assemble a, quote, shipping parcel of 94 Negroes for the New Orleans market. Then followed a listing of the men and women who made up this lot, their first name only and their price. George, $1,450, Robert, $1,565, Violet, $1,320, Marianne, Isaac, etc. for 31 lines. The traders would regularly consult prices as coldly as one might check the stock market. A couple of random quotes from the archives of the slave traders. From North Carolina, I write you to ascertain the price of Negroes in Richmond at this time. I want to buy 5 or 6 boys and girls from 8 to 12 years old, or from 5.5 to 4.5 feet high. Another, what can be had for two girls? Number one about 7, the other 9. Number was a grade, among others, including age, health, behavior, etc. The carefully researched details of this book are horrific and likely not new information to many. I know this is all very truncated, but I knew it would be cold, so I will read one more paragraph before Janette's story. This is toward the end of this little book. And herein lies the key to this whole undertaking, everything this book is about, race. If you begin with the absolute belief in white supremacy, unquestioned white superiority, unquestioned black inferiority, everything falls neatly into place. The African is inferior racial stock living in sin and ignorance and barbarism on the dark continent until enslaved by the English, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and others. Slavery thus miraculously becomes a form of uplift for the supposedly benighted and brutish race of people. And once notions of white supremacy and black inferiority are in place in the American South, they are passed from one generation to the next with all the certainty and inevitability of a genetic trait. As Illinois was the black servant in the author's childhood home so eloquently put it, Charles, why do the grown-ups put so much hate in the children? And now the story. The following is an advertisement that appeared for several consecutive weeks in the Lynchburg, Virginia, in November and December 1826. Executor's sale. Will be sold on the premises on the first day of January 1827, the well-known and valuable estate called Poplar Forest, the property of Thomas Jefferson, deceased. Also about 70 likely and valuable Negroes with stock, crops, etc. Signed by Thomas Randolph, executor of Thomas Jefferson, deceased. Several days after the auction sale, a local man who had purchased a Poplar Forest slave girl on his behalf wrote the following letter to Thomas Randolph. As will become clear, the buyer allowed the slave girl to remain at Poplar Forest for several days after the auction, and during that time something almost unimaginable happened. Sir, on January and Sunday last, I sent my son to inform you that the girl named Janette, age 14 years, which he bought last week at Poplar Forest for $290, is burned from the right shoulder to the foot, particularly her breast, and she is so burned as to have but little use of the right arm and leg and of several fingers, which she cannot use. The doctor that visited her says she will have a cancerous breast. She says that all this was caused by the overseer, who in an angry fit threw her twice into the fire which had caught accidentally to a stack of straw from a fire that she and her little boy had lighted in the night while they were feeding the cattle, for which purpose they had been sent. I informed her that I would be obliged to send her back. She then implored me not to do it, for she would not find her mother, brothers, and sisters, and the overseer would surely punish her for having made public his treatment toward her. I now propose you, sir, to meet your approbation, to proceed to estimate how much she is worth, and I will make you the offer to keep her at the price she will be valued by our joint appraisers. That is all I can do, being guided by humanity for the unhappy creature and being the most offer I can make. I am willing to keep her to attend to my child, for she cannot do much else. Unquote. Despite the horrific events described in this document, it is essentially a business letter. The buyer is seeking a reduction in the price of the slave girl, Janette, who is now damaged goods, not the same human merchandise purchased at Poplar Forest on New Year's Day. And at no point is there any discussion of punishment for the overseer who committed this outrage. Let's kneel for Janette. I don't have a time